Hi, and thank you for joining us, for our webinar today. The title of this webinar is Inclusive Talent Leadership Development. You'll be aware that we pull together the programme for these webinars based on issues, concerns and thoughts arising from our LGBTQ staff networks. And one of the topics they particularly wanted to hear more about was inclusive talent leadership development. So shortly I will introduce Ruth and Deborah, who will talk about that for you. First of all, I wanted just to remind people to, Evo, we seem to have timed out. I don't know what's happened there. Evo, can you see what the box says?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, we're live again now. Apologies for that. So I will shortly introduce Ruth and Deborah to talk on the topic of inclusive talent leadership development. I wanted just to remind people, please, to complete the evaluation. Some of you have fed back to us that the SurveyMonkey only allows you to complete it once. We've now unlocked it, so you can complete it multiple times. Please do complete it because it gives us really helpful feedback about how you found the session, what's been most helpful, and also planning future sessions. And the other thing I'd like to apologise for is yesterday's webinar, which did go sadly awry. We have rescheduled it though for the 24th of February, and we will be publicising that via the comms route as we have done previously. So for those of you that tried to access it yesterday, I apologise. We had various IT errors, so we have deferred it to the 24th. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Ruth. First of all, Ruth Molina is our head of talent in the people team in the Northwest NHS ENI team. Ruth, over to you.
Hi, thank you. I think my mic is muted. Hold on. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, perfect. Yes, thank you. Sorry, it was saying muted. Hi, thanks, Anthony. So Deborah and I are going to present to you today. We're going to start off by talking and summarising the conversation. So I'll give a summary in terms of what I'm looking to cover today, then I'll hand over to Deborah, who will do the same. So we're going to start off ultimately talking about inclusive talent really, and why it's important to have an inclusive approach to talent, and then talk about our culture and look at asking ourselves some questions around our culture. Is it inclusive? Do employees feel they're able to bring their whole selves to work? Looking at what we're doing well, looking at what we could do better, and how other organisations have an approach to inclusive talent. And then I suppose the reality really of what inclusive culture looks like, or having an inclusive culture looks like, and how does that feel? And then we're going to look at some actions that we can take away. So I'll cover that piece, and then I'll hand over to Deborah, who will take the reins and talk about leadership development. But Deb, do you want to just give an overview of what you'll cover shortly? The reality really of what inclusive culture looks like, or having an inclusive
I'm afraid I'm getting some feedback. So Ruth is just completing her
and then we're going to look at some that we can take away.
What she's just said, so I can hear her before I start. But that may not be the case for our participants, so I'll try and speak over that. As it says, I'm Deborah Davis. I'm the Managing Director of the NHS Northwest Leadership Academy. Speaking about inclusive leadership development. Ruth is just completing she's just said, so I can hear. I'm really sorry.
I can hear.
It's very often. I am here really to talk about inclusive leadership development, but I'm by no means am I.
Deb, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry. I'm really sorry.
I can hear.
Very often. I am here really to talk about inclusive leadership development, but I'm by no means am I. Is it just me you can hear now?
Yes.
Sorry, everybody. You may not be getting the same feedback. Sorry.
You have a somewhere like a headphone something.
Shall I carry on?
You can hear now.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, everybody. You may not be getting the same feedback.
When I'll just battle on and hopefully you just hear in one voice. As I say, I don't feel that I'm in any way putting myself forward as an expert from an inclusive leadership development perspective. I do understand and have lots of expertise around leadership development, but really I've been on a journey myself. So obviously we have as an organisation really focused on the whole inclusion agenda. I want to share some of that with you today and how we've evolved into this space. I'm delighted to be part of the session and really looking forward to the interaction as well. Thank you.
Perspective, I do understand and have lots of expertise around leadership development, but really I've been on a journey myself. So obviously we have as an organisation really focused on the whole inclusion agenda. I want to share some of that with you today and how we've evolved into this space. I'm delighted to be part of the session and really looking forward to the interaction as well. Thank you. I do understand and have lots of expertise around leadership development, but really I've been on a journey myself. So obviously we have as an organisation and I want to share that with you today and how we've evolved.
Apologies, it's telling me that they are getting all the feedback as well. So, Evo, is it possible, will it help us if we log out and log in again, or is that going to upset everything?
I'm not sure if that's not going to stop the event. I'm going to ask quickly the IT to join.
It's telling me that they are getting all the feedback as well.
I don't know why this is happening.
Will it help us if we log out and log in again, or is that going to upset everything?
If that's not going to stop the event, I'm going to ask quickly the IT to join.
Deborah, when I mute your laptop, when I mute you, it stops. So I think it might be. I don't know. I really don't know. Evo, what do you suggest we do? Do we have any idea? Can we ask people to log out and log in again? Will that work?
I think if we log out and log in again, we're gonna stop the live. If it's possible to just reduce the sound of Deborah's laptop or Ruth's laptop, I think the sound is coming from their side.
Okay.
So if I'm happy to continue, I don't know whether that is causing any problems.
No, yours is okay, Ruth, I think, so far.
Laptop.
Do you want me to speak and see if that's okay?
The sound is coming from their side.
There's a delay and then we're getting the message played back again. So it's doing a loop from somewhere, but I don't know where it's coming from.
So if I'm happy to continue, I don't know whether that is causing any problems.
No, yours is okay, Ruth, I think, so far.
Although when Ruth was speaking earlier,
You can see if that's okay.
The sound is coming from their side.
Can we just try one more time?
Do you want me to try? I'll do a quick test.
Okay, so I'm not hearing anything played back.
Yeah. Sounds fine now.
I think we're good. I think we're good to try again.
Okay. Should we just start going through the slides? Yeah. Ivo, over to you.
Yeah.
I think what we wanted to just move it along the slide. Sorry, I think what we wanted to talk about today, initially started to talk about today, is how EDI obviously is on the agenda for a lot of organisations, and we know, if anything, it's actually getting higher on the agenda and it's increasing in terms of importance to organisations. But we really wanted to understand a bit more about how an inclusive culture feels. So organisations will have an ED&I agenda, but actually in terms of what's on there, does it feel like it's having the impact it should have within the organisation? So Ivo, if you move on to the next slide, slide 2. Perfect, thank you very much. So there's lots of information out in the market around why diversity is important to the workplace, and I don't think this will be a surprise to many people listening to the call. And obviously from our point of view, in terms of the people team, it's really important that we understand that having a diverse workplace actually helps attract future talent into the organisation, and really sets an organisation out there as an employer of choice, helping to attract people into the organisation. And actually, most people now, when they're looking for a new position, will go onto the organisation's website and look at the brand, how they position themselves, and actually if they're showing as having an inclusive culture, and do their own research. There's lots of information out there. There's lots of stats and figures and research around how having a diverse workforce can impact an organisation, but it's really around more profit, better reputation, retaining talent, higher engagement for the people that work in the organisation, and actually better retention, so retaining that talent within the organisation. There was some of that research was done by Glassdoor, where they were saying actually 67% of job seekers class diversity as one of their key areas they were looking for when they were looking for where they would work next. So attracting talent, being more productive, innovation, creativity, and really working a lot better as an organisation. So huge reasons why having a diverse workforce is important. So we're just going to go on and have a look actually what that feels like for an organisation. So Ivo, next slide, please. So I think it's important really to ask ourselves that question, really honest question in terms of, do we feel that we have an inclusive place to work? What does our company feel welcoming for our colleagues? I think it's sometimes when we look at an ED&I agenda and priorities, it's around bringing to life some of the opportunities and some of the interventions that we already have in place. So yes, we'll have networks, and yes, we'll have inclusive policies, but actually ultimately, does the culture feel inclusive? Does day-to-day interactions between employees, day-to-day interaction between peers and leaders feel like it's inclusive? Next slide, sorry, Ivo. So I looked at some research done by McKinsey & Company. So McKinsey & Company did a piece of research where there were 2,000 people globally involved. And actually what they found was 1 out of 4 employees that took part in that piece of research hadn't come out at work. So, and it went on to talk, and we'll share the piece of research afterwards, but it went on to talk about some real life lived experiences and how people were articulating what had actually happened to them in the workplace, how people have been treated, and actually the reality of organisations that probably feel like they've got an inclusive culture, when you actually start speaking to people within the organisation, their actual experience is quite different than that. So you'll see there about, it says being authentic once you've made it is easier than being authentic when you haven't. And the study actually showed that there were more people lower or earlier in their career saying it's more difficult to be authentic and being honest at work. That actually they felt like once you'd made it into a position and once you'd made it into a more senior role, actually then you had more, you felt like you had more opportunity to be honest and open. But even so, I think it was 1 in 3 below a senior manager reported being out to most of their colleagues. But even at senior leaders, 1 in 5 people still hadn't come out at work. So it was 1 in 5. Yeah, even in senior leaders, 1 in 5 were not broadly out at work. So really interesting information. And I think one of the things that struck me that I hadn't really thought about before, and probably because I am a heterosexual female, you know, married, 2 kids, dog sat next to me, so probably not very diverse at all, really. One of the things that struck me was the multiple coming out conundrum, how that came out as part of the research. That not only was it incredibly important decision for people to decide if and when to come out, but actually it wasn't a one-off conversation. People were talking about having to have the conversation every single day, every single week, and even when you've had the conversation and you've been quite transparent with your peers, that you then might meet some clients or go out to a work dinner when we could, and still having to have that constant conversation. And also the piece around people that have, you know, intersectionality across different diversity. So you've got that piece around females already feeling like they've dealt with the gender stereotype and then actually not wanting to then come out because they've already got other issues that they're dealing with in the workplace. And it was just that comment there, why add anything else to make it even more difficult for yourself? So really interesting article and piece of research. Also, the next point down, people talked about being the only person of colour and one of 2 LGBTQ board members. The article talked a lot about onlyness, and Deborah and I were talking about this the other day around, again, both of us being heterosexual females, about how, you know, you're not always able to put yourself, even though you'd like to, in someone else's shoes. But that feeling of onlyness really struck a chord for me in terms of being able to picture that, well, actually, if I did walk into a room, you know, virtual or otherwise, of a group of Black men, actually, how would that make me feel? And actually, what support would I need if I found that experience quite daunting? So like I say, interesting views around, actually, yes, we might aspire and want to have an inclusive culture, and we might have lots of initiatives happening across an organisation around networks and conversations taking place. But actually, the reality within different organisations is people are still feeling like this and dealing with issues and challenges on a day-to-day basis. And we want to go on to talk about best practice and what organisations can do. But I really like the point of, and it's on there, about the small day-to-day things are actually the most meaningful. So it's that day-to-day interaction about how people feel that actually determines whether people feel like they've got that seat at the table, and actually if they feel like they're treated equally. So next slide, thank you, Evo. So this is just some data that came from the same study that was talking around microaggressions and how different people had different experiences. So you'll see there obviously changes hugely in terms of people's experience in the workplace, particularly again around LGBTQ women had experienced more microaggressions, and just that feeling of feeling the pressure of needing to play along and dealing with, you know, inappropriate humour, sexist jokes, comments that are, you know, underhand and it might be seen as banter, but how, you know, different people have to deal with different microaggressions within the workplace. So yeah, unacceptable and shocking data to see, but I think it was important just to show it. So I'm just going to ask Evo to play a short video. I'm hoping technology is in our favour and it actually works. So this is a video from the Ant and Equal Workplace Advocate website. And it's Alex Drop who is talking about the power of bringing yourself to work, and actually Alex's experience and a real life scenario in terms of what was important and how it made Alex feel. So I'm going to hand over to Evo, and hopefully this will play seamlessly. Or not, as the case may be. Bear with us, callers. Hold the line. It's coming. Evo's given us a thumbs up, so I'm rest assured. I'd sing you a song if I had any skills in that area, but I don't.
We do seem beset by webinar gremlins today, don't we? We'll try our best.
We can't seem to hear it. I'm not sure if anyone else can hear.
Oh, I can't hear it either.
We'll just try one more time, and if not, we'll just move on, and we'll send it out afterwards to watch. Evo, shall we move on, or do you think it's fixable?
I'm sorry, is it not there's no sound, right?
No sound, yeah, no sound.
I think if you carry on, Ruth, we'll send it out subsequently.
Yeah, no worries at all. So, like I say, I came across that, and that was Alex talking about experiences, really. So Alex was talking about working in financial services through the 90s, testing the water by wearing a tie, I think, initially, and then testing the water by wearing braces, and then coming out to colleagues, and then still feeling like not being really truly authentic at work, and then talking to her colleagues around transitioning, and actually received really supportive feedback from line management around what do you need from us, and they were talking about you know, bathroom facilities and pronouns on name tags, and just really kind of educating peers and educating even families when you go home about actually what did Alex need to make life easier, really. And Alex said when having the conversation with peers, it was like, you know, just get back to work, we really don't care. But actually feeling like finally being able to be 100% authentic and being able to flourish in the workplace, be authentic, feel completely supported. And if people didn't know what to say or how to say it, that actually they'd ask and feel that was fine and feel quite empowered to ask the question. So it was just around, we talk about inclusive culture and what it means, and we've talked about some experiences that people are still having. I just thought it was interesting to hear on a really positive experience about actually what does it look and feel like when you've got a truly inclusive culture. And just that clip really brought it to life, even in what you might think as quite old school in sort of financial services, how that bank had really progressed and had, in Alex's opinion, you know, felt really truly able to be authentic and bring a whole self to work. So I thought that was really interesting. So we'll share that afterwards. So next slide, sorry, please, Evo. So we should be on slide 6. Perfect, thank you. So this is a bit of a wish list, taken off the internet through different articles, kind of what we understand around. As an organisation, if you were sort of starting from scratch, what would you put in place to have a truly inclusive culture and attract inclusive talent to work for the organisation and kind of drive your inclusive agenda forward? And Deborah's going to come on to this a little bit later, but I just thought it would be interesting to put it up there and just for people to have a look through and think, well, actually, yes, we do that. Yes, we've got that. But actually, is it leading us really true to what we actually want to see across the organisation? So have we got role models that are LGBTQ that actually people can look up to and aspire to? Have people got sponsors so they feel like their careers are important and they feel supported across the organisation? Have we got diverse boards? Well, we know we've not, because we know we need to change that, and that's one of the things that Deborah will touch on in terms of leadership development. Yes, we've got networks that are active, but actually, what does that, what if we wanted to take those to the next step? What would that look like? So it was just, like I say, a bit of a wish list that and I suppose positioning it in terms of how do we take ED&I from being an important agenda item and key to the success of the organisation, actually to translate into individuals feeling like it's actually being played out and it's making a difference and it's impactful and it's changing people's experiences within the organisation. That was me to hand over to Deborah, and I'm hoping we have more success in terms of a seamless handover. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to pass over to Deborah now, who will pick up the call. Thank you.
Ruth, I've got a couple of questions in chat. Are you okay to take them now, or would you like to take them at the end?
Oh, pressure. I'll take them now.
Okay, so going back to your assessment of experience at work, do we have a similar example of that bisexual orientation just in the NHS? And is there any data collected on experience of trans colleagues?
I will say, Anthony, I'm going to come back to you. I will say I don't know, with my honest answer to that question. So just, and I'm not going to make excuses, but I joined the NHS on the 1st of December, so I've not got as much data and information as I would like. And I think actually on that point, when we were talking, Anthony, Deborah and I, about doing this talk, it was that, well, if questions come up about what do we do and why do we do it, I don't think I'm the best person to answer the question. So I don't know, Anthony, do we have, I'll hand it back. And actually, if we don't know between us, I'll commit to go away and find out that information and come back to you.
So we don't have an assessment similar to the one that you describe. solely by sexual orientation. What we have is staff survey and pulse surveys locally that help us pull together a picture of what it feels like. We do collect data from other sources, so we ask people to self-identify on ESR. The issue currently is that ESR is not representative of all the characteristics we would want to represent. So, for example, trans status is not an option on ESR, and there is a national piece of work looking at that. The reason we need that is because we need to know what our workforce baseline is. If we don't have the information, then we can't loop out to people and seek information to work with you to understand what good looks like. So there is a loop here of work that needs to go on. I think it's all a moving picture. I think the fact we're talking about this today and through this month is kind of paramount to our commitment around these agendas, and I would ask you to reach out to us to help us, to support us really to improve. Certainly we can, as soon as we understand how many trans colleagues we have, we can reach out and get more clear information. At the moment we are reliant on what people disclose to us outside of ESR.
I think it's
quite tricky.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think, I mean, in my previous organisation, there was a lot of data and information that we were trying to get that people, you know, would class it as sensitive information, for want of a better phrase. And it's that fine line, isn't it, between we want to get the insight to be able to shape the intervention and the support, but then people, without the intervention and the support, people don't always feel comfortable to share the information. So it's a little bit chicken and the egg in terms of what we can get and how we can get it, and people feel able to share it, and where the information's captured, and getting that holistic view of the landscape.
Absolutely. And what we want to get to, all we really find out is when the experience of colleagues have gone particularly well or particularly badly. We want to hear about the everyday lived experience of what it really feels like to work here, and that's the bit we're not currently getting. So we do need to reach out more. We do need to develop our staff networks, and I would say I would ask trans colleagues to reach out to the LGBTQ staff network, which is very friendly and welcoming, and to raise concerns and issues there, because we are really tuned into what those voices are telling us. What we are aware of, though, is those voices are not as representative as they could and should be.
Great, thanks, Anthony. Next question. Stay off mute because you'll probably end up answering it. Are you on mute now?
Sorry, let's go back to Deborah and then we'll...
Great, next slide, please, Evo, thank you. I think when we started to look at inclusive leadership development, it really, have we got the next slide, Evo, please? It started to make me question sort of myself really as a leader, and you know, was I truly inclusive, and what did that mean? And you know, looking back through my career, you know, I've had a long career in the NHS, and I started in the NHS as a nurse, and I think I've always thought of myself as an inclusive leader. And I think what I loved about nursing was the real privilege in the fact that you meet people from sort of every walk of life, and you know, with many different lived experiences, and the fact that actually you know, I have a real curiosity about people in general, and I think I would like to think I embrace difference, but it's then how does that translate into what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I think I've been on a sort of journey to inclusion for a long time, but I think probably over recent years it has become much more, I think, acute, and I think it, you know, the agenda has always been there, as we know, but I think more recently there's a lot more commitment to it, I get a sense, and a national commitment in a way that I'm not sure we've seen quite as much before, and it is on everybody's agenda. But as I say, I started myself really and thinking, actually, you know, who am I listening to? Because like Ruth, I'm a white heterosexual woman. So how do I understand what it feels like for other people who may be gay, maybe lesbian, maybe transgender, and again, others, you know, as Ruth has mentioned around intersectionality. So, you know, what does it feel like to be a black gay man? with those multiple levels of discrimination. And so again, I think a bit of humility around, you know, sort of accepting that I don't necessarily know, and I have to listen, I have to really try to understand others' lived experiences, work with others to get into that space where it starts to become more clear what might be helpful in this space around what we do, and in this instance, particularly in relation to leadership development. I think again, it's about having some empathy and again, getting to that point where it's not just about understanding, but it's how are you truly standing up and advocating for others. And we hear a lot about allyship, but again, to be an ally, that has to be practiced. You know, you have to stand up and be counted in that space, because otherwise, again, it becomes sort of tokenistic. So again, I think it's, you know, do we all question ourselves around, you know, what we think we can actually do? And some of this is collective effort, but a lot of it is actually individual effort. I think in the past we've tended to target leadership development to those protected characteristic groups, you know, like our BAME colleagues, or, you know, people in the LGBTQ community and others, when actually where we now are putting a lot of focus. So we do take some positive action, but I think where we're putting a lot of focus is around, you know, all of our staff. How is everybody truly committing to making this an inclusive workplace? So that led me on from my own sort of thoughts around me as an inclusive leader to our team, because obviously the whole of our team are involved, whether it be from an administrative perspective, whether it's from a project management perspective, whether it's commissioning, whether it's the strategic decision making around this agenda. We all need to really understand it, because again, how can we be informed commissioners? So again, it's, have we got a shared purpose in this endeavour? You know, what is it that people understand? Where is our commitment? And I would say my team, you know, are really committed to this agenda and put a lot of effort into raising their awareness. And we've done quite a lot of internal exploration, and I just wanted to share with you some of what we did. It was great, actually. We had a new member of staff start with us who came from an LGBTQ plus charity. And so what we thought was fantastic, and we really embraced the experience that she brought and the insight, etc. And again, often we find, don't we, when we have new people join our teams, they join in a new role and we don't actually tap into a lot of what else they've got. So if you just go to the next slide, please, Evo. So Lucy ran a great session for our whole team about LGBTQ plus awareness. And what happened really, because again, we know that people feel really uncomfortable in this space and people are terrified of offending. They don't always understand some of the terminology. And so there was a sort of safe space was created, and where we could really share thoughts and ideas, people could ask questions. You know, obviously people were very able to say, actually, I don't understand it, or I don't know what this means. And it was kept within the room, but it did become a safe space to share and understand. And some of that was understanding more about sexual orientation, gender, again, this concept of minority stress, and really starting to understand the various terminology and what it means and what is good practice in this space. So by no means am I going to go through the whole presentation, but I was just going to show you one example of what we talked about. So next slide, please, Eva. So this was, again, people moving away from a binary way of thinking, and a lot of the terminology, you know, like pansexual, I think most people were familiar with bisexual, but some of the other terms, you know, cis, and again, looking at gender, cisgender, and people just didn't understand. And I think people can have a very binary way, you know, you're either heterosexual or you're gay or lesbian. And again, from a gender perspective, it was similar. And it was just great to be able to have those very open, honest, sort of exploratory conversations that meant that people could ask the questions. And because Lucy came from an environment where, you know, she had a lot of experience in this space, she was able to bring a lot of expertise to that. So it really started to help us explore, you know, this agenda in particular. Obviously, we're looking at inclusion as a whole, but I think it really took us to a different space. I think some of the people that did find that discomfort much more difficult started to become more, I wouldn't exactly go as far as to say comfortable, but I think got to a place where they weren't shying away, because I think if we shy away from these things, then actually that pushes people even further away, because we're not opening up and we're not being empathetic, we're not understanding, you know, we're just, I suppose, locking ourselves away and remaining in our sort of ignorant position, really, however well-intentioned we might be. I think we talked quite a bit about intersectionality and what that meant, and the fact that you get these overlapping and compounding systems of disadvantage. So again, you know, trying to understand how that must feel in that space. I was really struck at Osman from the LGBT Muslim activism and advocacy group, Hidayah, spoke, I think was it recently, and I listened to his speech, and again I was very, very struck by, you know, when he talked about how it was at home, growing up in a Muslim household as gay, but having 4 brothers and a father, and I think he described it as toxic masculinity and him finding it difficult to be in that space. And I think the thing I was particularly struck by what he said was that Hidayah had become his adopted family. And I think we often talk about the NHS as a family. And I think, you know, in this endeavour, how do we make it feel that everybody belongs in that family? Because I think at the moment, some people would say they belonged more than others. And so, again, it just started to make me think around how can we educate ourselves? How can we start to step into a space, even if we feel uncomfortable? And obviously, Ruth started to talk about some of the ways that we can do that. And some of that's on an individual basis and some of it collective. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Evo. So I suppose Ruth started to sort of build that case for, and we know that the more diverse our workplaces are, the more productive they are, the greater the solutions, the greater the innovation. But I think there's another case as well, which I think over the last year, from a BAME perspective, we have seen how disproportionately our BAME colleagues have been affected by COVID and our BAME communities. But in actual fact, even before COVID and when that was sort of came to the fore, we knew that was the case around health inequalities and the fact that our BAME colleagues, you know, were affected in a way that others weren't. And it's the same for the LGBTQ plus community. You know, I think the term weathering, you know, when you're facing discrimination, you know, on a daily basis and through your life, it does have an impact on your health and well-being. And so from a health inequalities perspective, I'm not sure we always see that case, or people aren't as aware of it. So again, how do we start to step into that space, as well as obviously with our BAME colleagues too? I've asked sort of what good looks like, and again, I said at the beginning that I don't profess to be an expert, but I think we're starting to understand some of what good can look like and some of the actions we can take to start to become more inclusive as a workplace. There's a lot of work going on nationally. People might be familiar with the Building Leadership for Inclusion work. And again, I know there's some work going on nationally to start to sort of define what does an inclusive leader look like, or what does an inclusive staff member look like? You know, how do you know what strengths you might have in that area, and how do you know the areas to develop if there isn't a criteria by which to measure, really? So again, hopefully that won't be too long till fruition, and obviously that will start to form some of the basis as to what we need to focus on. Again, what leadership development is required, I think it's at multiple levels. As we've said, I think some of it is the supporting of staff to feel that they belong, you know, to be truly included, to be helped to progress, etc. But also it's about how do we help sort of all of our colleagues to become much more inclusive and understand perhaps the times when their behaviours, you know, aren't actually supporting that agenda. I think on the delivery perspective, it makes me think very much, and that goes back to why we've worked quite a bit as individuals and as team members, because obviously we commission our leadership development. So for us to be informed commissioners and ensure that the people that we then put forward, our development providers, are fit for purpose and up to the job, we put a lot of effort into understanding that and understanding what their practices are, you know, what their internal policies are, how inclusive they are, because we want to ensure that we have inclusive recruitment to programmes and interventions. We want to include the content, and the way it's delivered is truly inclusive. So again, you know, the more informed we can be, the more we can ensure that's actually happening in practice. And again, you know, it'd be great to get your feedback if you do take part in any of our programmes, and I'll talk about a couple shortly, because again, if it's not feeling like that, then we need your support just to understand, well, what different could we do? Or if you feel that a development provider perhaps isn't being respectful, or the language isn't respectful, etc. We'd want to know that, because that's not the intention. We're trying to set it up in the right way. Next slide, please, Evo. So I just wanted to touch on the people plan, and only because I think it talks very much. It's the first time we've had people right at the forefront of what we do. Often it's been finance, quality, and the sort of governance agenda, and workforce, strangely, has always sort of, come a sort of probably a third, if you like. So it's great that we've now got the people plan. It says there we're 1.3 million strong, we're all walks of life, all kinds of experiences, and it's how can we truly make everybody feel included, and how do we look after our people from a health and wellbeing support? How do we help people have a voice and a leadership culture that's inclusive and compassionate? Again, looking at people's skills and experience. And often, as we know, when we have difference in a room and really diverse conversations, the solutions and, the ideas that are generated are often so much more rich than when we've got groupthink, really. Again, to Ruth's agenda around growing for the future, we want to get much more diversity. We know that it's not where it needs to be. So again, the people promise talks to some of those elements as well. So I think there's a real national commitment to this, and lots of support that's going in around the edges of bullying and harassment, all of those things that really start to give us a better picture of how things are and how we can then start to take some action. Next slide, please, Eva. Again, this just plays to Ruth's point she mentioned before around the sort of policies and benefits, the employee life cycles, all of the things that we might do. And I just wanted to highlight to you that Stonewall have a sort of index link where you can, as an organisation, you can put yourself forward to be one of the top 100 employers, and you take part. They haven't done it this year, this year, because I think probably because of COVID. But I assume this was information that was released last year. But I just thought it was interesting to see who in our Northwest area actually were in that top 100. Because again, I think often if organisations are doing this well, how do we share and share that best practice and understand how they're doing it? Obviously, NHS Business Services Authority is a national organisation, but again, it may be helpful for us to just tap in and see what these organisations are doing and learn from them, really, especially as we're working across systems now as well. Eva, next slide, please. I wanted, as part of that, one of the areas that Stonewall look at in relation to being the top 100 employer looks at trans-specific work. So again, I thought it was perhaps just useful to see some of those areas and examples. So as it says there, does the organisation provide support and guidance to individuals who are transitioning, in the workplace and to their managers? And how does a manager support an individual? How do they start to have conversations about how they want to communicate this to their colleagues? And if we'd seen the video, I'm sure some of that would have come out, be able to watch that afterwards. Again, does the organisation enable non-binary employees to be recognised on workplace systems? Again, communicating trans-specific events, how is that highlighted within the organisation and promoted? Again, are they trans people profiled in employee communications, etc., etc. And I've learned quite a lot from a really great colleague and friend, Tara, who many of you will know. Tara's really helped me understanding more about how it feels to be transgender and how it feels to operate. And it's interesting, I just wanted to give an example of, I follow Tara on Twitter, and she put quite a challenging tweet up about, some discrimination, and I supported it. And I was really shocked, would be the word, by the vitriol that came back in relation to that. The number of, just as I say, terrible tweets back. And I thought that just gave me the tiniest little glimpse of what it feels like. And by no means, it wasn't aimed at me as such, but in some ways, because I'd supported it, I guess it was. But when I think about what Tara's been through and the hate that she faces, as I say, it gave me the tiniest little sense of it. But it's how do we start to put some of these, actions actions in place so that in the workplace people can feel safe and feel supported and feel that they belong. So next slide, please, Evo. Again, just very quickly, I'll leave, obviously you can have the slides afterwards, but this was just really a thing around belongingness and uniqueness. And we can say that we're inclusive and that somebody is included in our team, if you like, or in our workplace. But if it's on our basis or related to our dominant culture, that isn't, they might have a sense of belonging, but we're not celebrating that individual's uniqueness. And so for true inclusion, that individual needs to be treated as an insider and belong, but really valued and celebrated for the uniqueness that they bring. And again, this brings us back to this bringing your whole self to work. So again, you may want to consider what's it like in your workplace. Is there a dominant culture that suppresses, uniqueness? And that may be across other protected characteristics as well. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of offers and interventions that I think play into this agenda. So we've been doing a lot of work around healthy leadership behaviours. Obviously, through the pandemic, etc., we've been trying to look after everybody's health and well-being, and obviously this has impacted us both personally and professionally. So we've been looking at how do we promote these practices. How do we make sure that our leaders and our staff members are promoting an environment that is truly the culture that promotes health and well-being? And again, I think a lot of the behaviours, and there are a whole series of defined behaviours within the framework. So we're doing further work on this. It will be released very shortly. But again, I just thought it plays into this space around, belonging, keeping people safe, health and well-being. Next slide, please. Very conscious of time. And this next slide is talking about an initiative that we're about to release in April, and it's about system leadership readiness, and it's going to be a development centre that tests your capability, if you like, to work across systems without authority and collaborate well. And what we wanted to do was to take a really inclusive approach to this. So we've been working with the inclusion team around what that looks like. As I say, we'll be going out to advert for the initiative sort of April time. And what we hope to do is obviously prepare people for system working and really then start to have a potential pipeline of diverse future system leaders. So again, if this is something you're interested in, do look out for it. And I think as well as evaluating the actual development centre and what it brings, we're going to be evaluating the inclusive recruitment process in the hope that what we learn from that, we can then pull together some guiding principles that we can use in the Northwest, but that we can share with other regions as well. So again, if you're interested in any of that, being part of that, it would be great to know. Next slide, please. And this is just the final slide, and it echoes what Ruth said earlier, really around what we need to put in place within organisations and within the workplace. Some of it, I think, aimed at you as individuals. So I'd invite you really to look through some of these areas and think, actually, what am I doing as an individual? And what actually, if you're in a strategic role, are there other areas that you can support? And I suppose I'd just like to take this opportunity for the people that have really supported me on my journey and helping me with my understanding, because without that insight and understanding others' lived experiences, I wouldn't be where I am, and I'm still on the journey. I'm still learning, and again, anybody that's interested in helping me with that, I'll gratefully receive, and anything I can do in return would be good too. So I'll leave it there because I'm very conscious we've only got a few minutes left.
Thanks, Deborah. That was really helpful. So a couple of questions. One I'm dealing with just in chat because it's a long question, and I'm not sure that I might have more information to feedback than you guys will, but I can share the question in a moment. One of the questions that we have goes back to our original question about understanding the baseline of our workforce. So the question goes along the lines of, can NHS organisations capture trans status and sexual orientation details via other means to ESR, ensuring it's asking using best practice guidelines and any information is kept securely. The more we ask the question, the more positively people will respond. Even just asking the question supports visibility.
No, and I suppose I would just agree, Anthony, as we've said earlier. I think we're all in that space of, and I think that's why, and we've had conversations, Ruth and you and I, around, unless we do have some sort of baseline, it's really difficult to know whether we're making any progress, or, you know, actually, you know, we don't know how many people, you know, are in that space that we need to support in this way and help progress. And so I would just agree, Anthony, and I suppose just thinking of ways we might do that, if not through ASR, etc., then, and maybe other organisations do that better.
I also think there's a bit here, isn't there, about skilling up managers to have really good quality line management conversations, because if staff build rapport and have a good line management relationship, they're more likely to be honest about their personal circumstances. So it's about, and I think that's where working remotely is a challenge, because it's much harder to build a rapport when you're working remotely, when you can't see the whole of the person and the way they present and the way they hold themselves and how they're looking generally. You can't necessarily pick up on the nuance that you would in a face-to-face conversation. So I do think some of that is really challenging. I think some of it's really challenging.
Yeah, we've got, you know, the new Project M national platform that really is looking at sort of bite-sized learning differently for team leaders and line managers. And I'm just thinking, actually, is the more work we could do in having that type of conversation, you know, that makes, and I mean, this last slide talks about discomfort. And often, you know, people do find it harder, don't they? And it's only once you've built that rapport up that you can have that sort of conversation. So I'm just wondering if there's some ways that we could start to, you know, provide some support material, really, just for people having that conversation.
I think that would really help. I do think it's a challenging area to get the conversation right, because if the first conversation you have with your line manager closes down that sort of conversation, you're not going to keep pushing it, because there's already an imbalance of power. There's already, as you say, multiple outing conversations potentially gone on. If you don't have that rapport, you're not going to go that way with your conversation.
No, and again, Anthony, back to that discomfort. If you're even uncomfortable starting that conversation, you're not even going to have it, are you? You know, whether it goes well or not, you're not even going to get into that space, because the person who needs, you know, to initiate that is potentially just too uncomfortable to do that, really.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess from the Leadership Academy perspective then, so just wondering how can we work together to build a consistent conversation basis in skilling up new line managers?
Again, Anthony, we've got our board that has been in existence. We've taken the opportunity recently to review the membership and how we might do it differently, and want to really broaden out, so that we can reach out to other networks and make sure that we're having the right conversations with everybody, really, but very conscious that, you know, sometimes it can appear tokenistic, can't it, when actually we want to have real meaningful conversations. So again, with the various networks, I wonder if there's people that would be willing to put themselves forward that we can call on. As I say, all of the development work we do, we want to be inclusive. So it's just for certain programmes or interventions. It's how do we do that on a consistent basis. So again, anybody that would be interested and willing to sort of help us with that, because, you know, all of our products we do in a co-creative way anyway. So again, if there's ways that we might think about doing that more actively, that would be great if anybody is interested or has other suggestions.
I'm just wondering, is there anywhere that documents already, you know, Deborah, that when you're talking before about the exercise that you did around a safe space and language and kind of not hints and tips is the wrong thing to say, but like you say, Anthony, just that guidance. So is there something already that's put together that we can share that's just guidance on, you know, to bring to life some of the things we've talked about, you know, people, again, have to come out multiple times. Deborah, we spoke about it, didn't we, the other day, about, you know, is it okay to ask someone, you know, you fall into the trap, don't you, asking someone if they're married? Do you just say you've got a partner? So all the kind of jargon and the worries that people have in terms of the pitfalls and saying the wrong thing, could we have some guidance around that if there isn't anything already?
I think this is a lot about, and we've talked about this a few times, haven't we, in our team discussions, but there's a lot in here about asking questions respectfully.
Yeah.
So if you don't understand or you don't think you're getting the information that you need, then you need to ask questions in a way that is respectful, and then you're far more likely to get respectful answers to build a picture and build rapport in a relationship with the person you're talking to.
Absolutely.
It's that willingness to take that leap of faith almost, isn't it? And expose yourself as a line manager.
I was going to say that, Anthony.
Sensitively. Yeah.
And potentially get it wrong. You know, but know that actually in at least, you know, putting that forward and getting it wrong, there's further learning, isn't it? And I think that how to sit with discomfort sort of takes you through that a little bit. You know, that the more you might do that, the less uncomfortable you feel, you know, and the less, because as it says there, I resist it. So sometimes when you start to feel like that, you shut down, don't you? So I think it's about noticing that and actually what might I do differently next time. So I think there's, I mean, if they're not in existence, which I'm not, well, we haven't got them currently. I need to just check on the if there's been anything developed on the Project M site. But otherwise, you know, I'm sure we could look at that type of support, and I think just helping people to have a more comfortable conversation, or at least if it's uncomfortable, be a bit more, I suppose, what's the word? Not as resistant to that.
Yeah, prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. One more question in chat. I know you've got to go, Deb, but one very quick question in chat. So the attendees saying that's.
I've lost you, Anthony. Sorry, Anthony, I didn't hear what you said then.
I think he's he frozen. Eva, can you see the question?
Yeah, we all lost him.
Sorry, I disappeared then for a moment. I don't know if everybody went off or whether it was only me.
I think it was only you, Anthony, but I missed the question you asked. And actually, don't worry about me having to go right now, because the person thinks what I was doing tomorrow, so there's no rush now.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So there was a question we had about this, the line management conversation. So one of our attendees has said, absolutely agree. Authenticity, empathy, and genuine allyship is fundamental to line management relationships. I wonder how we learn that stuff, though. So how do you learn to be empathic? How do we support? And it's about that kind of script, but some of this is about emotional intelligence, isn't it? It's not about something you can just learn on a bit of paper. This is about I think it's about the right person being a line manager.
Yes. I mean, I think
what are your thoughts about that?
I think you know, emotional intelligence, you know, is a massive part, isn't it, of management practice, really. I think, you know, we can we can think of different styles of manager, you know, some very, very task orientated, you know, and again, there is a balance, isn't there? So I do think it's much more in that emotional intelligence space. I think, you know, for those, I mean, and again, we know people have different preferences, different styles. So some people will be more comfortable with that, others not so much. But I think it's about how much, again, you're prepared to spend some time developing, getting into that space, and really understanding it is part of your role. And you can't, you know, because again, I think sometimes people retreat to their comfort zones. So the areas actually that they, you know, they feel very comfortable in sort of discharging as part of their duties, but other areas perhaps not. And so I think, and again, I think how are we testing this when we're looking at leadership development, and how we understand where somebody is currently, and how do we then provide in a safe way support and development that stretches them, you know, into that space, Anthony, really. And again, there may be, and we know, I'm sure, people that perhaps have ended up in really quite senior leadership roles that may not necessarily embody, you know, inclusive leadership, or indeed have a huge amount of emotional intelligence. So I think, again, it's about, and I think in the past, perhaps, I think we've shifted now, but in the past, people might have seen some of this work or the emotional intelligence side of things as, and would have described it as a sort of touchy-feely. When, as people say, you know, the soft stuff is the hard stuff, because if it was easy, you know, we'd be doing it. And actually to focus on systems and processes and procedures, which play a part in this, but actually it's easier to do that than to focus on the culture and how we need to operate to shift that culture, really. So I think and the culture takes longer, doesn't it, to shift. So I think it's really where the focus lies for leadership development in some ways.
So final question then for Ruth, I think. Ruth, if we revisited this webinar in 5 years' time, what kinds of things would you be telling us, and how might the picture look different? Thinking about talents, I think about how we're developing, you know, downstream, all of the things. What would be your aspiration for how the picture looked?
You know what? It's an interesting question, and it's a very broad, big question to ask. I would hope we wouldn't have to be having the conversation as much as we are today. And do you know what I mean by that? In terms of, it's not something that we have to focus on because it becomes part of how we operate. It becomes part of who we are, what we do. And yes, there's always obviously areas of improvement. There's always things we can do differently. But the fact that we're still having to talk about honesty, you know, integrity, compassion, it feels like, yes, we're moving it forward. And obviously, I think diversity and inclusion has come, you know, huge steps forward in the last few years. Last probably 4 or 5 years, it feels like. But we've still got a long way to go. You know, we've still got a long way to go. We still focus a lot about talking about BAME. We don't talk about all protected characteristics. We still hear lots of stories about people that don't feel included. So in 5 years' time, I would hope that we have got definitely more diverse boards, that we've got diverse role models, that people feel supported, that people don't worry about putting an application in for a position, and that anything to do with, you know, with all the protected characteristics will stop them or hinder them being successful. So I know that maybe feels like it's too much of a wish list, but I would just hope that we've moved it forward enough that people generally feel more supported and it looks different. And I know obviously we talk about a diversity being hidden, but what I mean, it looks and feels different. It looks and feels more inclusive, and we're not hearing as many stories about people being hindered in terms of their career and their progression because of senior leaders, managers, or someone making a decision on them being suitable for a job based on you know, any of the protected characteristics.
So let's agree to meet back here in 5 years and have a celebratory party of how far we've come then.
You'll be out of a job if what I've said is right. You might not be needed.
Thanks for that, Ruth.
Anthony, I really hope so.
I suspect I'll always be needed.
But it brings us back to what everybody can do, Anthony, doesn't it? That, you know, what you personally, I don't mean you, Anthony, I mean, I know.
I think there's a bit here about, isn't there? So I know there's work afoot for us to recruit more widely. So there's a bit about, isn't there, about not just working and supporting the people that we have, but attracting people that we don't have, that we need the talent from, and that genuinely convincing them and supporting them to understand the NHS is actually a good place to come and work in, and that we will value them and support them and enable them. And it's just getting that message out there, isn't it, to build that kind of downstream.
It is, Anthony, and especially at the moment when we know that people have, you know, perhaps lost jobs elsewhere. You know, it would seem terrible that we couldn't attract people, you know, into the NHS at this time, because, you know, I'm sure that, I mean, it's tragic what's happened to many people in other industries, but as I say, I just think it would be great if we could attract them into the NHS, as you say.
I think, like you say, attract them into the NHS, but then once people are here, that they feel like they can be completely honest and open, and nothing around how an individual acts is affected by their diversity, whether it's how honest they are, how authentic they are, how they dress, what jobs they apply for, whatever it looks like, isn't impacted by anything to do with their diversity and their decisions.
Yeah, for me, I think what good looks like is that people's diversity is an added bonus to them, so they bring bonus. So what they do is good, but the fact that they're from a diverse and inclusive background is even better. It adds value to them, for us.
And that's really embraced and seen and celebrated, Anthony, really. And I think that's the bit, as I say, with all staff, isn't it, and all leaders, that we need to shift that.
So I think we wanted to finish up, didn't we, unless there's any more questions, Anthony, sorry, just on asking people really to take away an action. So whether it's a small action around something they're going to do differently, or whether it's going to, join a network, become an ally, but just think about themselves, think about their kind of inclusive teams or how they operate. And then if it is someone in a leadership position and they can impact strategy or policy, that they think about how they can behave and operate moving forward. So everyone takes something away in terms of how they're going to do something different.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive place to end. Can I thank you so much, Deborah and Ruth? Really appreciate it. Thank you. Really helpful. Really, really helpful.
Thanks for inviting us, Anthony. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for sharing. Can I just ask that for people that are left in the room that they complete the evaluation survey, please? If you have done it once, you can do it again. We've unlocked it again, so you can do it as many times as you like. Really important that you tell us how you found the session. And I apologise, we had a few IT issues at the beginning. Thank you very much. Stay safe. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.